be able to see everybody. Thank you very much for coming. We have two young lady students who came before they became adult to Belgium and already here, being students and receiving education, became young adults. And I think there are more and more children growing up. We have this issue a lot. The children who are grown up being brought to Russia, and not only forcibly against the will of their legal representatives, but also children who were brought by their parents and actually disagree with the idea to be taken to Russia and who are now turning 18, 19 and want to live. This is one big issue. And another big issue that some people who came with parents or without parents sometimes here got education and now also have a challenge. What's next? As children they had some situation, but as adults and even sometimes already educated adults, it's another maybe opening door, another question and a challenge. So thank you very much. I just propose that you all introduce yourself. We'll start with Maria Snovska.
Yes, my name is Maria Snovska. I'm being humanitarian action policy officer in the European Disability Forum. Originally, I'm from Ukraine and moved here because of the war. And we have a big program related to the situation in Ukraine, and we support organizations of persons with disabilities in Ukraine, and made some studies regarding the situation of children with disability from Ukraine and their family in Europe. It was in 2022-2023. So the situation is different now, but I will be happy to share some of my thoughts regarding this.
I'm Mary, I'm from Ukraine, and first of all, I'm so thankful for Belgium to have us here and to have an opportunity to educate, to be educated, to attend universities, to live, to be in a safe place. And in Ukraine, I was a student at school and I was a singer. In Belgium, I continue my career, trying to become a singer, and I'm also a student at Artevelde. I am very, very grateful for having me here.
And two words about me. I am already here in Belgium for 3 years. I arrived when I was 18, and now I'm finishing my bachelor in KASK, in Art Academy. I'm here without my parents, and I'm learning all this way, how to study, how to integrate in Belgian society, how to find a job, how to learn language, all on my own, but with great support of people around, and great support of Belgium.
Hi, my name is Merel. I work as a researcher for the Flemish Peace Institute. We are a research institute that is connected to the Flemish Parliament, and we mainly focus on topics related to peace and conflict. I'm sitting here because I just finished a report that was asked. We were asked by the Flemish Parliament actually to do a research to have a look into what Flanders can do to support the reconstruction and recovery of Ukraine. And so over the past year, I've talked to many people in Flanders as well as inside of Ukraine to see what Flanders can do specifically. But I have to say I'm very humbled here. I'm not Ukrainian, I don't speak Ukrainian, so I'm definitely not an expert, but I'm very happy to share what I've heard while speaking to so many different people in Flanders and Ukraine on the topic of what Flanders can do to support Ukraine.
Hello, my name is Anna-Marie Gielen. I work for Pax Christi Flanders. It's a peace organization. And since the first war started, we created the platform Peace for Ukraine. I went 2 times to Ukraine to give training on non-violent resistance, and in 2022 we started a lot of projects inside Belgium and also with Ukrainians. So, for example, we hosted in our building 2 summer camps for children. I went myself twice to Ukraine since the war started. I had talks with a lot of people on the ground. Children are not our focus, but of course, children and young people are part of the war. So we also have connection with peace activist movements, conscientious objectors. So that's more or less, and political prisoners, but that's more on the Russian side, because we also deal with the Russian peace movement and the Russian opposition, and so that's very short.
Yes. Thank you very much for joining the discussion. Thank you for coming from Brussels, Antwerp, and for coming, especially in difficult exams time for students. I think it's important conversation when we can hear the voice of people who actually about whose rights we're actually talking, but also join together in answering these difficult questions. We all know that in 2026 the general politics, the directive of European Union might end, and there might be new proposals, I think, to people who came from Ukraine. Maybe some states will have their national policies, maybe Belgium or Flanders will have their national policies. I understand that actually often European countries are interested in Ukrainians capable to work here, those who learn language, who are educated here. I think quite many people consider what's going to be possible in this way, but also quite many young people plan to come back to Ukraine. They are also very interested in working on reconstruction and the professions that our participants are getting, like business and architecture, I think are very well connected to a reconstruction project. So we would like to think what kind of recommendations, proposals, opportunities could be discussed with all the stakeholders regarding this future after 2026. Is somebody future?
So I am right now on my 2nd year, and next year going to be the last one of a bachelor degree. I'm so happy actually to have a European diploma, and especially Belgian one, because I never thought I would, and that was a chance for me to achieve something that I can apply in my future for Ukraine, because this is definitely what we're gonna need in our future, and what Ukraine is actually in need right now. After my study, I would be very glad to come to Ukraine and apply this knowledge that Belgium taught me, because I had a lot actually, and the education is incredibly new and modern, that is actually relates to nowadays, and that will definitely relate to future. So I would be very happy to work in this field in my own country, and to help, to apply, to show, to actually present how can that specific field look like.
In my case, I'm studying interior design and planning to do masters in architecture, and this is very important topic right now in Ukraine to read basically all the cities, and of course, like in an ideal plan that I can see for myself, is now to finish my studies, maybe get a master's, and or do internship And that would be really, really interesting, and I think would be really helpful for Ukraine as well. If there would be some programs, for example, like internship, for me, working like in Belgian company who are investing or working together with Ukrainian companies who are busy with rebuilding, because it quite can be very interesting because I know Ukrainian mentality very well. I as well studied in Ukraine, and I know as better than anybody else what exactly we need there. And as well, I have some understanding of Belgium. Structure of working, as well language, as well Dutch language, just that culture, which is also very important. So yeah, it would be great if there would be some possibilities to combine and work together. And so what I mean is not like asking for even more support, like keep me at studies and keep me on work and more, but no, I mean more to be like a part of things that are gonna happening anyway, and that I can be useful and that I can be apply my knowledges that I got here in Belgium to something important for my country as well.
Yes, in April we went to Ukraine, and before we left, we had a meeting with the cabinet of the Minister of Migration, the Belgian minister, and the question of the status of refugees in Belgium or in the whole European Union is already being thought of, what after March 2026, and also what if a peace agreement would come, what will the European Union decide? And so we were a bit surprised actually that nor the Belgians nor anyone else is preparing this question, because maybe because it's complex, but we think it's important to already start discussing it among the European countries now, because we hope at least one day or another there will be a possibility that people go back, and not only one or two, but maybe thousands or even 1 million from the 8 million that are abroad. But the same question, we went to Kiev and we had a meeting there with the ombudsman, and also there they are not preparing for the coming back of Ukrainian citizens. So we see a big lack of interest from the hosting side and from the original side, so to speak. So I don't have a solution, but I think it's important that people start getting connected to see how can this reintegration, remigration, how can it work, because there are empty cities, there are broken buildings, there are lack of the kind of infrastructure and structures who were destroyed and who had to be rebuilt, and not only bricks but also the mental structures and so on. So it's good that people like you are thinking of it, and so it would be good that also older adults are preparing for the reintegration, because there will be this movement towards back to Ukraine, and also there will also stay, a lot of people will stay. So also there's a question, what kind of status will the Ukrainians get? Will there be a regularization procedure? Because asylum procedure won't be an option, because after 3-4 years, where do you get the evidence that you are a victim of war or repression? That's because you have to prove that you personally are in danger and not the whole population. So that's also issues we are trying to
propagate, because it's important that there is no vacuum, because in a vacuum, power and money will play and not the interests of the people.
Yes, I completely agree, and I think obviously whatever is going to happen on the front lines, but March 26 is very near, and it has to be planned, the next step. And I'm sure there are some plans, maybe not exactly Migration Office, but other organizations, maybe parliaments are thinking of what to propose, and we expect that people who have jobs, for example, will be offered some other type of residence permit. But of course, there are issues of growing up children, of changing situation for them. For children, it changes, I think, much faster and much more radical than for adults. They came here, some as teenagers with parents, and now they're already without parents, adults. Some as very little children who hardly now remember Ukraine, and soon they're going to be already teenagers, and with different identity, with a different view. And this can become both problem, because they have to come back to country, they forgot the language, they are not fluent in anymore, and advantage, because I think, as Lisa said, we are not asking for more aid. On the contrary, it is an opportunity, it's a window of opportunities also for the West, because rebuilding Ukraine is going to be a European challenge. And it's not so easy maybe to find people with whom Europeans have completely common understanding of things, but people educated here, who got this kind of, I don't know, business mentality, planning mentality of local schools, might become a very good mediation and connection. So I think in a way it's also an opportunity for Ukraine, but also for the partners in the West.
Yeah, I would like to say something. First of all, as I remember, in 1 week or maybe a little bit later in this month, I think European Council is going to discuss an issue of future for Ukrainians in Europe, and I don't know what kind of solution they will have at the end. But yes, March 26 will come very fast. And it's very important for all of us to have any forms of solution. Regarding people with disabilities and the children with disabilities and youth with disabilities, of course the situation is more or less similar with other Ukrainians, but with some additional challenges. First of all, connected to services, and if people staying somewhere abroad, and in Belgium as well, for 3 years, it means that they find a way how to solve these issues, how to adapt themselves to current barriers and challenges. And we should remember that in Ukraine, these people face with much more challenges. For example, Tatiana said about gaps in access to education. If you're talking about children with disabilities, these gaps are much bigger, and children and their families, they face with much biggest problems, because before 2022, quite active Ukraine start to implement inclusive education, but some methods they are not applicable to online system, or not enough preparedness to work with children with disability from the side of educational system in Ukraine. Of course, it doesn't mean that nothing changing during this time. A lot of changes in different spheres, but it's still not enough. And one of the main problems is children with disabilities who were in institutions in Ukraine, or now in institutions in Ukraine, or even those, as Mr. Zakharov said about children deported to Russia, the majority of them, they were from different institutions, and honestly, biggest part of children from institutions, they are children with disability, even if they don't have official status regarding Ukrainian laws that they have disability. And that is why the process of deinstitutionalization in Ukraine is one of the crucial points, and it's one of the directions where Europe and Belgium in particular could help Ukraine not just financially, but using experience, maybe not just the good practices, because I know that unfortunately Belgium is not the best example of deinstitutionalization and in general support of the rights of persons with disabilities, but maybe some challenges European states face on this way, and how they suggest Ukraine to solve these problems and to work with these challenges, because otherwise these children with disability will have just one future: to go to Ukrainian institutions, and it's not that future we would like to have for them. Okay, I'll stop here and we'll be happy to compliment other speakers later.
Yeah, so in the terms of help and the aid, I'm actually the one who was taught by Belgium, so I think that I could help, and I definitely can implement something in the organization, like as well protection of children's right or people's right, or based on what we've heard today, especially from our speakers about the children, about the sexual assaults that children had experienced, and not only children, I mean the whole population, especially when we're talking about toddlers or children. This is so painful to hear, and I mean, I just got that this is the embodiment of devil, and it doesn't stop. And when you hear about that, it's hard, and especially when you understand that someone is talking about your country and about your own home, you are the one who needs to help.
There is a big, vibrant Ukrainian community today in Belgium. I think Belgium hosted over 90,000 Ukrainians under the Temporary Protection Directive. That doesn't mean that this is a community, because there were already Ukrainians present in Belgium that were living in Belgium before the full-scale war started. But so there is this vibrant community of Ukrainians who know Ukraine, who grew up in Ukraine, who know the culture, who know the language, who have a network there. And then at the same time, they have been spending time in Belgium as well, so they know languages here, they know the culture here, they know how things work here, or they're starting to learn at least. And they are also looking for opportunities to stay connected to Ukraine. Maybe they won't go back permanently, but they do want to stay connected to Ukraine. And so I think there is a big opportunity from both sides to work together. And so in our research, this is also something that we highlighted, is that it's very important for Flemish policymakers to also really actively include and engage the Ukrainian diaspora community inside of Flanders, because they have so much knowledge and so much experience, of course, with their own context inside Ukraine. And then on the temporary protection, I think what is very important now is just certainty for Ukrainians inside of Europe. I've heard from civil society organizations in Flanders that the number of questions about what will happen next year in terms of visa, in terms of residence permits, has increased massively. People are not sure what to do. It's not time to go back yet to Ukraine, but what else can they do? How will they be able to stay? I think the implementation of asylum systems all across Europe is very different according to the different member states. And so we risk, if there is no certainty by March 2026, that many of those systems will be overflooded. People will be treated differently according to the member state that they are staying in, and I don't think this is a positive evolution, or this will be good for Ukrainians nor for the European Union. As a community of the European Union, we've decided that Ukraine can become a member of the European Union, so it is on the way to membership of the European Union, and I think this is a very important part of that, to take care that those people get the security that they need to be able to become a part of that European project, and also engage in that. So I think this certainty is very important, and maybe I would like to challenge a little bit that there is no thinking around this happening yet. I've talked to think tanks, Ukrainian think tanks, among others, and civil society actors that actually come up with very concrete ideas on what could be the next step for the European Union. And one of those ideas is to create a more permanent residence permit specifically for Ukrainians that makes it possible for them to flexibly move between Ukraine and the European Union. which then in turn also can benefit the reconstruction effort. Because again, those people know the context, they are very good bridge builders between the European Union or European countries and Ukraine, and it would be an opportunity for both sides again. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree that of course people are preparing. We've also heard from Titana's report that there is one of the protected groups that Ukraine is supposed to take special measures for children coming back to Ukraine from other countries. That's very important because it's not the process going to start. This process already going on all the time. Some families go back on one hand. On the other hand, of course, I have this picture in my eyes of Syrian refugees, like really, literally running back by foot when it became possible to come back, and then when Syria started to change. And of course, it makes you think that there are going to be some Ukrainians also doing the same. But as the Syrians, also we see some are interested in staying in the country that they already made big effort to get used to. And it's completely true that if it's a European integration process, some, we know it from other eastern parts of European Union, some people anyway leave the country at the moment when they become citizens of the European Union and can move freely. But obviously Ukraine will also very much need people coming back, and it might be done attractive. Like for young people, for ambitious people, for patriotic people, different categories of people might suddenly decide to go, even if they didn't have the idea, if there are like good ways to do. But if people have families and occupation, nobody waiting for them in Ukraine, no home, it's going to be very difficult to do it without special measures, without special offers and opportunities. And I think it's important to have like real roadmaps or action plans. And maybe not for European Union as a whole, but for separate parts of it, for countries that have some idea what we want to do with Ukraine and about Ukraine, that is going to be part of Europe, whether war stops or continues, whether hopefully there's going to be complete the occupation or not complete. Indeed, Europe and Ukraine are not going to be separate parts of the world anyway. Thank you very much. Is somebody else willing to say something? Or we have questions? If you have questions, I would propose that maybe Tatiana and Jan also join, and we can have questions as reported.
We see that from Russian side there are statements that they want to, for Ukraine and the rest of the world, to recognize the part that they occupied since 2014 and 2022. And for example, especially for those people, for example, if already the Belgian parliament is thinking about the next program, but from my point of view, there is no common idea between Ukraine and Russia about regarding this topic in particular. So how they implement, because people, for example, who are coming from Zaporizhia or Kharkiv or Donbass or other regions, how can they cannot come back to their homes, and what can be the solution for them? Because Ukraine is a really big country and people from different parts are coming here in particular. This was my first question, and second question was, do the authorities like European Parliament or Belgian Parliament or Flanders Parliament take into consideration the thoughts of civil society organizations or NGOs? Do they have open talks, or how do they make the decision, and what are they not consulted, but do they consider your opinion, and if you Thank you.
Yes, to answer some of the questions.
Maybe the one on the policy side. Since we are an institute located inside the Flemish Parliament, we do have a lot of contacts with policymakers to advise them based on the research that we did. So we will never advise on topics that we have no expertise in. But the things that we look at and that we really research, there we do have active conversations with policymakers on the advice that we give. If they listen or not, of course, that's always a bit more of a political decision, but I do think that there is a certain openness within the government to listen to civil society organizations and see what they say. Of course, it's never a direct line. If I say A, then they will do what I say. But I do feel there is an openness to it, and I think especially on the topic of Ukraine, it's also new for Flanders, especially for Flanders. I think the region has never been active in a conflict region, not on reconstruction, not on recovery of conflict regions. So it's quite new for the Flemish region, I would say, for the Flemish government. That doesn't mean that they don't have any ideas about what to do, but I do think that they are looking for inputs and that they are open also to hear from civil society what the options could be.
Maybe I could add that on European Union consultation, more or less the same, yes. There are a lot of consultation with civil society in different forms, different bodies. Some of the international NGOs, they directly have a name of lobbying some human rights issues of how to work with them on the European level. But regarding what will be the decision and how Europe or separate countries will manage this. Your first question, no one knows. I think no one is able to answer it now.
I have a comment on the discussion. There was mentioned that neither Europe nor Ukraine does not enough steps to reintegration of the people who are staying in Europe and they are coming back or not coming back to Ukraine. I want to mention that as for me, it is quite a false start because the war, Russian war in Ukraine is still going on, and no one mentioned the people who are going to come to Europe from Ukraine because the territories, like the situation on the front lines, are quite difficult. People from the front lines, my friends who are fighting there right now, they are saying that the situation is even more difficult than in 2022 on the front lines. That means that more Ukrainian territories will be occupied and more people will have to escape to the safety. So we have to think not only about it's a kind of a false start, thinking what will be after the end of the war, the right end of the war, when Ukraine will overwin Russia, because before that there will be no end of this war. And also what happened several days ago with Ukrainian security service blowing up Russian airports. I think that maybe a lot of you have seen the analytics from the New York Times and the other military experts, and they are saying that Ukrainians, because they were put in the situation that they had to, are taking the war to the next level. And now this fact of getting the target with the drones places us in the situation where no one is safe, even here. And this is the real situation that we have to think about before we're thinking about reintegration Ukrainians.
But even in this scenario, it doesn't mean that Ukraine became a safety territory.
Definitely. Yeah, so we can just go on for years, and this is something that we have to take into account, because people don't want to come back to the unsafe territory, to the unsafe where they can be hit and killed every day. This is something that we cannot demand from people.
First of all, I want to support Lisa and said that really Ukrainian rules be helpful for the quick ending of this conflict, of this war. And if we have no any idea for any future for our children, we will move our children to here, to the safety to Europe. But my question is, have you any open research databases for studying of opinion of Ukrainians or Europeans about Ukraine? Can I get success to your own databases as sociological research?
We at the Institute, we don't have databases ourselves, but there are quite some open surveys that are being done at a regular basis about Ukrainian attitudes towards the war, as well as the European attitudes towards the war. I know that the Eurobarometer, for example, so the European Union itself does quite regular surveys, and then you have some think tanks that do it. But I can list you a couple of them if you need it. I can give you my contact information.
We should research what Ukrainians needs, what we want. But right now, I'm veteran of Ukrainian war, and I know that war will not end maybe in the close future. Maybe it will be worse and worse.
Thank you very much, Evgeny.
Honestly speaking, I don't understand your question because in general this database must be closed, not open, because they include personal data of victims of the crimes, and without the agreement, it is impossible to open this data in general. Our organization has several databases. In our database is more than 125,000 episodes of war crimes, but there are closed databases. And we can provide information according to request General Prosecutor Office, for example, or Security Service, or National Police, or International Criminal Court. Yes, but it's very restricted information in general.
Thank you. Are there more questions? Or
Yes, first of all, thanks. Thank you very, very much indeed for the detailed and complete reports. It was very informative and important to hear them. And my question is to Ms. Simikov and Mr. Zaharov. Here there are representatives of civil society, not only but also those who volunteer, who work in the civil society in Belgium. What do you think are the concrete steps that, concrete help that we can provide right now to your organizations? This is a question for you. And then a question to the Belgian participants. Thanks a lot for doing what you're doing, and European. It's very important, but you must have noticed that there were some narratives that triggered actually reaction from the audience. And my question is how to make sure that you protect Ukrainians who are already traumatized by war from a kind of paternalizing approach, narrative that places them as some object of help or study, and instead gives them subjectivity. So how to think about your own discourse and make sure it doesn't trigger negative reactions or hurts the population that you seek to help. Thank you.
You see, in my opinion, it will be very good if Belgium civil society try to understand our reality and try to understand that Russia with a threat to Belgium and other Europe in general. In our country, many Ukrainians understand it very good. That is why, in my opinion, it's very vicious that European countries will help to Ukraine to win this war. I believe that in principle it's possible, but only with the assistance of the Western countries. First of all, European. It is first. It's necessary to understand our reality. It's necessary to know what crimes Russian military committed, what terrible crimes, what tortures are existed in Russian prisons and colony and in the occupied territories. Absolutely brutally tortured. After understanding it is possible to think what steps it's necessary to make for changing the situation. For example, by the way, for example, Turkish, after communication with our organizations, essentially increased understanding of our situation, and namely according to initiative Minister of yes, and President Erdogan, there was a big exchange, 1,000 for 1,000, and now they proposed new exchanges and sides agreed. It's a real assistance, because releasing of our prisoners is real assistance.
So the answer is that coming here, listening, and maybe spreading information later on from human rights protection would help.
I have one question, because all the report was so completely that it's very interesting, very nice, and very important. I am a refugee here, and my name is Evgenia Lutsenko. I am a human rights specialist too, and I know this problem. And I want to say that it is very symbolically that this conference is today, because today in Ukraine we remember children
Victims of sexualized violence.
which was killed by Putin and his army. It is June 4.
Yeah.
And I would like to say thank you so much, especially Stefania, Mr. Vivian, Olga, Abranica, which invited this organization, Mr. Vivian, for the possibility to invite very important specialists who really work in Ukraine every day in this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, 4th of June is of course International Day of Children Victims of Violence, and indeed,
Not killed.
yeah, but it is UN International Day, Children Victims of Violence, any violence, sexualized violence, physical violence,
Yeah.
deaths in the war. So it is indeed a very good day to speak about children's rights in Ukraine, who are all in danger every day actually, still. And
I would try to answer to the third part of the question.
third part?
To the third part of the question.
Okay, you would like to answer?
Yes, I can. First of all, I think that each of us can become an object of some research, like any times, because there are a lot of research in this world, and each of us, we are part of some group could be interested for different researches. So maybe it's not a big problem. But from the other side, I think that you are right in case of respect to meaningful participation of Ukrainians on different platforms and different meetings on so forth. And regarding our organization, of course, we are trying to follow these rules, and we are trying to organize meaningful participation for our partners from Ukraine, and we are trying to bring them as much as possible everywhere. But it's quite expensive and quite complicated trip. Even from Kyiv, it's a long way, especially for people with disabilities. And that's why sometimes our secretariat participates in some different events, but today I'm here not just a representative of European Disability Forum, but as Ukrainian human rights defender as well. And I think that I have a right to be here and to speak on behalf of my organization and my experience. But yes, you're right, to invite and to give an opportunity for Ukrainians with different experience to speak is one of the main tasks for organization working with Ukrainians.
Thank you very much. I think, if you don't mind, we can continue talking and exchanging opinions. There is some